Okay, I think we might kick things off, Jen. So yeah, thanks everyone for joining. So on this week's call, the key topic we're going to be running through is we're going to be talking through the potential use case of Livepeer. And joining us on today's call, we've got Jen from the Livepeer team, who's going to talk through, yeah, in a little bit more detail, some of the products and tools that the Livepeer team are building to drive usage of the Livepeer network. So to kick things off, I might pass things on to Jen to introduce herself, talk a little bit about yeah, what we're doing.
Cool. Yeah, I'm Jen. I know some of you on the call. I think a lot of it is Livepeer folks today. And I'm based in St. Louis in the US. But right now I'm in California at a video conference called Demuxed. And I've only been at Livepeer since August, so I'm definitely still ramping up. But yeah, before that, I came from Fastly, the CDN provider, and LinkedIn and BuzzFeed. And then at Fastly and LinkedIn, I worked on site reliability engineering and infrastructure. And then at BuzzFeed, I worked a little bit on that. But in the earlier part of my career at BuzzFeed, I worked on video and building out the first owned and operated video products BuzzFeed had, like playing video in their mobile apps and on their website, and publishing that and storing those videos.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. That's really helpful context. All right, and so yeah, before we dive into it a little bit more, could you just perhaps tell us a little bit about your experience at BuzzFeed and like some of the challenge you had to deal with, sort of scaling some of that infrastructure?
Sure. Yeah. At BuzzFeed, they were going at that time from being a company that, BuzzFeed.com, it was around 2015, 2014. BuzzFeed.com was its own like monolithic entity. And then, the media landscape changed and videos started playing on primarily on Facebook at that time and YouTube and Instagram, and so did other content. And I worked on the data infrastructure team there, figuring out workflows and pipelines to collect metrics from all those disparate platforms, and to centralize them so that they could be used. All that data could be easily accessible and stored for posterity to be used by business analysts and teams that made dashboards to show how content was performing. And then also working on the minimum viable products for and early versions of video at BuzzFeed, where like we built a transcoding pipeline that was just highly available and stored all those videos and made them readily available to be played on mobile apps. And we used Amazon Elastic Transcoder as like the core part of our pipeline. But that was kind of my first introduction to using, video transcoding coding tools and things like that. Yeah.
Okay, that's super interesting. So you're definitely sort of coming at this with yeah, like I guess a lot of sort of experience dealing with some of I guess the ways that these types of enterprises are looking at transcoding and some of the problems
Yeah.
they face.
And I think my experience at Fastly working on a CDN, I don't know how much folks, like how familiar with folks are, but it's a content delivery network. And the way a CDN works is they have what are called POPs, like points of presence, all around the world. So, and the goal of a POP is to, how your browser caches, websites so it plays easily on your phone. This is on an internet scale. So the POPs will cache, entire websites for a global audience, so that if you're in, Singapore or something, and you want to see the front page of the New York Times, your request doesn't have to travel all the way back to like New York Times data center in Virginia, United States. It might hit the nearest POP in Singapore, or maybe there's one in Tokyo, and that response is already cached there. So, when describing a CDN, there's some similarities with a decentralized infrastructure network like Livepeer, and the decentralized apps that other other companies in this space are making. So yeah.
Okay. Okay. Very interesting. And so I guess like leading on from what you were just discussing there, to sort of help some of us sort of understand some of the use cases, do you think you could possibly give us a little bit of context about the transcoding market, sort of given your experience, still operating in that space? So like,
Yeah.
yeah, I guess what are some of the problems that are faced in this sort of existing transcoding market, and
So
what's the opportunity there for Livepeer?
right. The transcoding market's like pretty mature in terms of there's end-to-end solutions that you can purchase from big players like Wowza, Mux, or Bitmovin. And then you can also buy, and even also from cloud providers, like Amazon and Google and Microsoft, or you can purchase like parts of your pipeline. Like I was talking about at BuzzFeed, we used Amazon's Elastic Transcoder to do our transcoding, and we stored things in an Amazon S3 bucket so that we could, we weren't doing live streaming there, but so we could fetch those videos and play them, whenever. And then, build out your own pipeline. I think the biggest problems that come with that are like the most like substantial problem is it's just very expensive um, to uh, to use any of those services. And also like when you are using a cloud provider or any of the big media servers like Wowza and things like that, you have to, in order to have like reliability and redundancy, if one of those services or servers like topple, you want to have redundancy in like a readily available additional server. And so there's just like lots of idle capacity that still like costs a lot. You're still paying for it, even though you're only using it when there's like tons of load or if like something breaks. So that also eats up a lot of your budget. And then, particularly for huge companies, they can pay for that kind of stuff. Uh, that's okay to have that solution. But if you're, a startup, if you're a smaller company, you're going to end up giving your entire budget, all your funding to a cloud provider just on your transcoding costs and the egress costs to get, the video out of their network. So it's just price is honestly the biggest thing, and the price to transcode and use those services, and price to have all that idle capacity just in case bad stuff happens. That's really expensive. And Livepeer, solves both of those. Once we reach scale, especially as Vin's demonstrated in like lots of the white papers and different blog posts, like transcoding on GPUs is just so much cheaper. And then with the public network, the public Livepeer network, the work is being done by many different entities. So there's always just like idle capacity readily available. And so you don't have to pay upfront or plan into your costs that like you always have to have an equal amount of capacity available. Like that's built into the system. So, I mean, that's where Livepeer comes in as like a total game changer. Yeah, like not
Cool.
to oversell it, but like a total game changer for the market. Yeah, it's been really cool talking at this conference about Livepeer. People are like, "What?" So very cool. Yeah.
Very cool. And so from like looking at things from say outside the transcoding market,
Okay.
I guess one question would be like, why hasn't the price already been commoditized? Like why are prices an issue? Like you would expect that, is it because it's such a specialist area and that there's only a limited number of players that can actually come in and sort of provide this? Or
So
how
I
do
think
you
a little bit like the setting up all that infrastructure is just expensive. So like there's some domination there. But also like the fact that we're transcoding on GPUs, like the miners' GPUs, is really different than how transcoding normally happens. It normally happens on the CPU. And that's just like there's a really that's like also just a big innovation that sometimes, when we talk about Livepeer and all the work we're doing with the Livepeer protocol and Streamflow and everything coming, a little bit of that like big innovation gets lost, but transcoding on the GPUs is a huge win. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's part of a bigger trend too, where it's like more usage of GPUs for things
Mhm.
other than gaming.
Yeah, transcoding on GPUs not that long ago was like pretty icky. The results weren't good.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, very interesting. All right, and yeah, okay, great. And then so I guess to dive into some of the products that Livepeer's team is building to sort of help drive adoption of Livepeer, I guess it'd be great to sort of understand a little bit about like how you think internally about building products sort of drive
Yeah.
this adoption. So like who are the different target audiences you were sort of looking to target?
Yeah, so when I think about, so I'm working on product pretty much from like a video perspective, not so much about the token holders or the infrastructure providers. So there's, Rafi and Adam who have been on different calls, like they can talk a lot to, folks who are going to provide the supply, the infrastructure and the tokens, and then a lot of folks in the open source community. But I mostly think about, in my day to day, the demand to use all that stuff, people and companies who need live transcoding. And as I've been, thinking and talking to others in Livepeer and also just in the video community, I think two big buckets of folks who want live transcoding are emerging. There's people who like public network users, people who are going to use um, Livepeer as we think of it now. But there's also this group of companies and platforms that are more enterprise users and have a little bit of a different set of needs. They don't just need live transcoding, but they also have some like support requirements. They want the tooling and how to access transcoding on Livepeer already built out for them. And also some of them, not all of them, but some of them have security and privacy concerns about their video being transcoded on, across the public internet by a group of minors who they don't necessarily know, and they don't know anything about. There's no like document with privacy and security,
Yeah.
concerns agreed to. So yeah, so the way I think of it is like public network users and enterprise customers. And those enterprise customers, there is a possibility that they would want like a separate network of Livepeer, like a privately deployed network of Livepeer in a big a mining data center that we have like a privacy and security agreement with. And so there would be, yeah, just another instance of Livepeer for each of these enterprise customers who have those privacy and security concerns. Some of the enterprise customers are, super interested in leveraging the public network and just more want tooling and support around it.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's sort of what's emerging. Um, Having said that, I think sometimes the idea of a private network, a separate infrastructure for an enterprise customer can be scary because we are like an open source, like we want to be the public transcoding infrastructure for the internet,
Mhm.
Um, but as we build tools for those enterprise customers, whether they're leveraging a the public Livepeer network as we think of it now, or this idea, these private networks, there's really similar tooling for each of them. Like everyone who uses the Livepeer for transcoding wants to know, like, is my stream healthy? Like a dashboard needs to happen for both. Probably both need some sort of API where they can like easily, or Livepeer can like easily ingest video streams. Things like that. As we build for one, we kind of build for both for a lot of stuff. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. And so on the private sort of implementations, I guess like would it be fair to look at it as, say, for example, some corporates want to build on Quorum or on sort of like private Ethereum implementations to get comfortable in like a private sort of like test environment, and then say maybe go out and build a fiat stable coin on the Ethereum mainnet. Do you think that's a fair way of looking at it, or
I think
do
for
they have
some
other?
customers, yes. For some customers, totally. You know, we're like, there's one video platform we're talking to who, like, to start, they'll use like our private, like Livepeer has a private network, a private Livepeer network that we just do like a lot of tests on, you know, before things get pushed to mainnet and things like that. And they're using our private infrastructure and things like that to start their testing. And then eventually, you know, traffic, they'll start routing bit by bit some of their traffic to, hopefully the public Livepeer network. Other companies will never do that, you know. There is a market for, you know, I think a way to think of it is like, think about Ethereum and Consensus, the enterprise Ethereum. There are some industries that could never use a like the broadly available Ethereum network. These are like financial institutions, health institutions, where there's, like, in the US, lots of um, privacy rules around health information. It's called HIPAA. And they'll just never be able to have that information in a decentralized network, just like legally. And so there are some companies that have lots of copyright issues with their video content, and it just might never be able to be in, like, the public Livepeer network. So some people, it's a stepping stone, and others, it's the end goal. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. But I guess if you look at, like you'd said, perhaps one of the challenges for like public financial institutions would be, they can't do it until those privacy requirements are met.
Yeah.
So I guess it's also possible that someday in the future, Livepeer could also meet for
Yeah,
these, enterprises, those video privacy requirements as well.
totally.
Transcoding privacy
Totally.
requirements.
And I think that, like, that area of research for Livepeer and like the surrounding community is too immature for me to see like when that could happen,
Yeah.
about the privacy stuff. But yeah, you're right. I wouldn't rule it out.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. All right. And so in your experience dealing with these sort of enterprise transcoders, do you feel that there's a lot of sort of like I guess so in terms of like the support they need, do they also need a lot of sort of, I guess, like man hours and like sort of hand holding to get comfortable and sort of like use this infrastructure, or is it more around tooling? Like what are the
Right.
issues,
So
barriers?
I think we're more inclined at this early stage to work with folks who just more need the tooling and are go-getters and can do a lot themselves, because we don't want Livepeer, Livepeer, the company, is not huge, and we don't want to turn into like an agency where we're just like hand holding one big client to
Yeah.
use Livepeer. So those aren't attractive partners right now. And we're more looking for like other folks in the decentralized application space, other startups who are into like risk taking and have a kind of a hacker mentality. Or just like friends and family in our community who are in the space that, have a high tolerance for figuring stuff out themselves. So that's more who we're working with at that super, super early stage. Remember, I've been here 2 months, so we're real early. And of course, the team has been working on stuff before me, but yeah, we don't want to become like an agency or anything like that.
Yeah, of course, of course.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And so, all right. So you mentioned that you're sort of focusing on so teams that need this kind of tooling. Could you talk a little bit more about some of this kind of tooling and like what's been requested, and what ideas have you guys come up with for products to build to sort of help on that side?
Yeah. So I think like a big thing is like, how do you get video into the Livepeer network? So there's all sorts of tooling that can be built around that, like a robust API, other tooling that sits atop that. The first thing we're working on is a Wowza plugin. So as I spoke about, I don't know exactly who's on the call, but Wowza is like a huge player in the the media server, the transcoding, like just the digital video market. They're huge. And they have a product called the Wowza streaming engine, which is like a server that, you know, software you download and you maintain. And it transcodes and live streams your video. It's great. But we are creating a Wowza plugin that you can use the Wowza streaming engine. So you have like the same interface as someone who broadcasts video, you know, you have the same interface for ingesting that video. But behind the scenes, instead of the video being transcoded on the host that has Wowza streaming engine installed, it's offloaded to Livepeer network. And it's really wonderful. Because all that work, instead of having to happen on the actual streaming engine host, now happens elsewhere. So you can have like one host that does 100 streams. I can't remember exact the number, but many, many more streams, instead of having to have a bunch of instances of the Wowza streaming engine. So your costs are gonna, as someone who uses the Livepeer network, are gonna go way down. So we're using the Wowza plugin not just to like have a cool first product and an entry point for a lot of video transcoders, but also to learn more about this enterprise video market. You know, Wowza is what's called a VSP, a video service provider. And by having this Wowza plugin, it opened the door for us to talk to the good people at Wowza and kind of learn about, you know, could we get a huge player like that to be using Livepeer as part of their infrastructure. Like there is a subset of customers who could be using the Wowza, could be using Livepeer for their transcoding. And if we could just sneak in and not sneak, that sounded creepy, but sneak in and get, you know, Wowza's customers to use our stuff, that could be really cool instead of having to find those customers one by one, you know? So yeah, the plugin serves like twofold there. And then also on top of that, we're exploring a couple other areas. One might have been spoken about on a different call, because I don't know if the call folks have heard about verification. So that's really important on the video verification, making sure the work is done correctly by a miner who's doing transcoding out in the world. So Yaya and the StreamFlow team at Livepeer are doing a ton of work on that. That directly benefits enterprise customers who use the public Livepeer network. So that's really exciting work that's happening there. And I'm actually not directly involved with that. The Yaya and the StreamFlow team are leading that and doing an excellent job. So, we have a lot of open questions about how do enterprise customers like to, oh, sorry. Eric said, I was saying Yaya. I meant to say Yandin that entire time. Eric wrote that. I apologize. I got too excited. Those Y names. Thanks, Eric. There are a lot of, thanks, Eric. Okay. So it's unclear how people would pay in this world. Enterprise customers, like there is, at least now, an aversion for many to pay in a coin. Whether we have sort of payment portal where people pay with US dollars or euros or whatever, or they're just billed manually at the end of the month, or they pay up front. However we do that, there needs to be some sort of tracking mechanism for like usage of the network, and that doesn't really exist yet. When transcoding happens on the public network, and payments happen in micropayments all the time, that doesn't totally work for enterprise customers. They want to be billed in chunks, so we're figuring out stuff like that. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I believe there's a few wallets and exchanges working on, like debit card or credit card.
Yeah.
To stablecoins. So
it could be an interesting place for us to explore as well, like leveraging something the crypto or Livepeer community comes up with. It's unclear for us.
I actually talked to Adam about this at DEF CON. And one of the main problems I see is that it's not just metering the usage of the Livepeer network, but as a service provider that's sort of acting as a middleman. You also have to take into account different statistics like bandwidth usage into what you're charging your customers. And another thing I talked to Adam about, coincidentally, is that we'll see a lot of need for tooling based on transcoding itself arise when Streamflow releases, because that's when that need actually becomes real. Whereas the current iteration of the protocol mainly focuses on staking, improving the crypto economic assumptions that we made. So the tools that we see coming out right now or that are already out are actually tools that pertain to staking and other staking related operations. So once Streamflow releases, I think we'll see a lot more video tools coming out.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see what the community comes up with. Like, I have my own ideas and things like that, but it's been really cool. You know, I don't come from the crypto world. I come from the site reliability and some video world, and it's been like pretty amazing to see the community around crypto. It kind of reminds me when I was working at BuzzFeed and you'd have all this like user generated content, and that was like really inspiring. But now with like technology, but it gives me the same like warm feeling. That was a very pleasant surprise.
Okay, that's awesome. All right, great. And so, now I guess to dive into some of these products a little bit more, which actually just reminds me on sort of, I guess, a bit of a side point. So with some of these with some of these private implementations, what is the impact of that for Livepeer token holders? So I guess would you see that as a way for a necessary step for these sort of players to get comfortable? Because ultimately things that are happening in a private implementation obviously aren't to the benefit of this network.
Yeah, I think that's a super good call. Like, so let's talk a little bit more with what how some enterprise customers want a private network in separate data center buildouts, meaning like a big mining company. They maintain our miners, or we use the spare capacity on their miners, but we've negotiated off-chain some sort of security and privacy requirement, some sort of dedicated capacity that's always going to be available for that enterprise customer to use for transcoding. This is sounding very familiar to like how Amazon, the cloud provider, uses it. It's still so much cheaper, but it has a lot of the same requirements. And all of it is done, off-chain. All the negotiating about bandwidth, all the payments, everything like that. So it doesn't in those cases. There's no Ethereum, there's no token staking, nothing like that. Having said that, it does tangentially, us working on these problems for enterprise customers does tangentially benefit the public network and Livepeer token holders, because number one, those enterprise customers just pay Livepeer, the company, money, which allows us to hire people and just like work on these interesting problems for the community. But, more directly, like some of the problems that these private, these enterprise customers who have this privacy and concern, some of those problems that they have about how to make the Livepeer video products more mature, how to easily ingest video, how different workflows that avoid a huge problem in our industry, which is egress costs, the costs accrued when video or data exits a cloud provider. They don't charge us to put our stuff into Amazon. They just charge us when we take it out. It's a huge problem. Those alternative workflows that we're developing for enterprise customers using private networks, those still apply and can be transferred and publicized for public Livepeer customers. And the more we grow, I have a hypothesis, just like we've seen with Ethereum and Consensus, the private Ethereum, like that as the enterprise Livepeer becomes more mature and more adoption there, we'll see a more robust community and set of tools around the public Livepeer network that will drive adoption there as well. So yeah, that's how I think of it. We're definitely focused on keeping like the public library as we know it growing and maturing, while exploring this space with enterprise customers and devoting time to it.
Right, and I guess for the enterprises that are willing to go out and use the public market, you would expect that because it's a public market, you would have more competition, and therefore you'd probably get the service at a lower cost. So that would probably create an incentive for people to go out and take that extra risk.
Like, yeah, the way I think of it is like there's the traditional cloud providers, the Amazons, the Googles, the Wowzas. Those are just the most expensive, and big companies, they have a lot of trust in them. And then a huge price drop happens, and we can still have excellent reliability when you go to like the enterprise Livepeer in a private data center in a private network, but you get an even better price drop, and you get to participate in a decentralized network and application, which in itself is an appeal for some enterprise customers. And that's an even bigger game changer in terms of price, which is, it's sometimes icky just to talk straight money, and that like why, but price is really attractive when you're transcoding so much video. So yeah.
Yeah, and I guess if you drop transcoding to a lower price point, you also open up new products and new services that
and also like to some companies that we talk to, they don't do transcoding. They'll just like have a video, an untranscoded video, and have problems with buffering because transcoding is just too expensive. So this opens up not only for existing transcoding customers across the world, like, ooh, something new and exciting and cheaper, but also opens up transcoding to markets that it previously was just not available in. Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's really helpful. And like, I guess for these transcoders, to think about cost, like what are some of the inputs that they have? So I guess like it is the cost of electricity. It's probably the largest cost, probably cost of bandwidth. What kind of determines like their cost basis?
Can you ask that question again? Sorry, it broke up a second.
Like, I was just thinking about private price versus public price, and I was trying to think, like we've seen with Bitcoin mining, we could see a lot of these operations move to wherever that sort of like cost of delivering the service is cheapest. And I guess that's a combination of electricity cost and bandwidth cost. So I think on a call previously we'd had someone mention Singapore because the cost of bandwidth is quite cheap.
We have another guy on the team, Philip, who does a lot of the R&D around that. And he's exploring, who are, first of all, the mine. So it's a mix of like the bandwidth and electricity costs, but also who are the miners, the big mining companies and big mining data centers who even have the capacity to support enterprise customers and the curiosity about it. So it's a mix of that, at least at this early stage. And then there's also like, we would love it if Livepeer could better integrate with traditional transcoding workflows that are already happening, by routing some of the data through traditional cloud providers. What prevents us from doing that right now is that there's just these huge egress costs when information leaves Amazon, leaves Google, leaves Azure. Is there negotiations with them that could happen where they're interested in exploring, cutting those egress costs for Livepeer? I don't know. So yeah, there's lots of areas where we're trying to cut those costs. Yeah.
True, and I guess if like I don't know, perhaps adoption of IPFS or something similar like that, a more decentralized cloud alternative could also sort of help remove some of those additional costs that you see today.
Yeah,
I guess that's okay, interesting. All right, and so in addition to some of these tools, like what other strategies is Livepeer team working on to drive adoption for these enterprise partners?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple things, like even so I was hired in the summertime. And also early in the summer, a guy named Mark was hired who does business development. And so I think, folks like us, not to toot our own horns, but, where our job is just to like learn about these markets and, build those bridges between these markets and the video markets and our engineering team. Like that's a huge step for the company, just to, another tool to help provide focus on video. Also, I spoke about the the private data center build outs. That's like a huge thing that we're starting on this quarter. And then, I talked about the Wowza plugin that's in a very early stage. We're trying to find plugin testers in Q4. We've got some of that starting. And then, just making it easier for people to use that. We want to increase documentation. We've been just kind of hustling and building stuff. Now we have to like make it production ready. And then, you notice that like livepeer.org, the website, everything is focused on our protocol and blockchain. And that's been really amazing to build out the core infrastructure that powers Livepeer. But we have to start transitioning some of those like marketing assets to be more video focused. So that's stuff we're working on, right now. Also, it's been we find that the open source and the blockchain and crypto community is much more adept at like searching out information. The video community, they're like, if we don't see it, like, this must not be it, and they just give up. So we're trying to make it easier for that community to find like more information. And then other stuff we're exploring that probably won't happen right this quarter is like just supporting more input and output formats, talking at more video conferences, finding out where video developers hang out, like what are the Slack channels? How can we best support people in those spaces where they hang out already? Things like that.
Okay, fair. Yeah, I guess that's probably one of the tougher challenges is just raising awareness outside the crypto markets. Where you have people that are just not aware of things like Livepeer as potential solutions.
Yeah, and it's been really interesting learning about how much to talk about how Livepeer works, with it's built atop, a blockchain protocol. Like, is that interesting to a video developer? Is that something they want to know about? Or is that like kind of just a distraction? What is most interesting to them? We're trying to figure that out. Yeah. And Eric, CTO Eric, has been like, exploring that ahead of, Mark or me being hired, and he talked on a podcast actually for the conference we're at and stuff like that. So just kind of putting the word out there.
Cool. And what is the general like first reaction you get from people when you?
The first reaction is like, so cool. Yeah, that's the first reaction. Like, what? So cool. Yeah. So it's been like overwhelmingly positive, and people are really excited to, get us out of like this early alpha version and start like using it. So we're really trying to work on getting the Wowza plugin and the underlying infrastructure, really, really in a good spot.
Good, cool. And do you ever ever get a sense of fear when you're sort of talking about a public blockchain network, or are you sort of trying to intentionally maybe not focus on that as much?
Yeah, so we don't lead with the public blockchain network because of the known like privacy and security concerns that we know a lot of video makers, video publishers, video broadcasters fear. But when people dig and learn more about it, there's a general curiosity and stuff like that. And so we definitely don't lead with anything blockchain focused. But when people ask, it's typically because they're curious. And then, once you get into talking about leveraging like blockchain off chain of a public network, there's that kind of eases some concerns. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. All right, and did anyone on the call have any questions regarding Livepeer use cases, or perhaps any of the any of the additional ways that the Livepeer team sort of working to build products and tools to drive usage of the network? No? Okay, cool. All right, great.
Thanks for having me, Nelson.
Yeah, awesome, Jen. Yeah, thanks for taking the time to walk us through a lot of that. That was really interesting and really helpful to just sort of understand where Livepeer fits in like the bigger sort of like scheme of things. Really helpful. Okay, awesome, guys. Well, look, I think we're going to finish up.
Sorry,
Yeah,
I wanted
go
to
ahead.
just mention one more thing. Sorry, I was muted. I was trying to talk, and I was like, oh, no one's gonna hear me. Just to answer Nelson's question a little bit, right? Like, what are the other things that Livepeer is working on that can potentially drive adoption later down the line? And I think, like Jen had mentioned a lot about like our efforts in getting current existing video applications to start using Livepeer, which is really cool and like something that we're focused on a lot. Another thing that I think has a really interesting potential, but it's a little less predictable, is this like open source ecosystem, right? Which like Livepeer is, you know, a completely open source project, and that's pretty unique in the video ecosystem. Most projects and companies in the video ecosystem are proprietary, and you know they're built behind an API. So Livepeer being you know one of the first companies who like really takes a big stance in being open source, has some pretty big long-term implications, I think, that we're going to start to see playing out this year and you know next year, when the network starts to become reliable and when people can start using this network for like production level video. The fact that Livepeer is open source is going to play a huge role, because there's going to be developer ecosystems that can be built around this. People can take the Livepeer code to customize it and build whatever they want. So it's totally not bottlenecked by the Livepeer company, right? This whole ecosystem can kind of evolve. And you know, like one of my goals for you know being at this developer conference in San Francisco is to get a sense of just what would people want to have this open source software do, like what are all the actual features that they would want, because that's something that we haven't really focused on just because of all the other things that we have been doing.
Okay, that's super interesting.
All right, good call.
Yeah, and just to add to that, Eric, when you sort of think of like, I guess like of like a sort of like live streaming stack or like decentralized live streaming stack, would you think of like, so you obviously have like Livepeer for transcoding, and then perhaps you would have some kind of, you know, open source applications providing this. Are there other layers there that you could see being added in the middle or closer to the transcoding as well?
So transcoding is kind of this like important layer, that thing that needs to happen for every live stream, right? But it kind of sits in the middle of this flow, which includes like first ingesting the video, and then you transcode the video, and then you would deliver or store the video, and then people watch it, right? So if we talk about either the ingest layer or the storage layer or the delivery layer, there's definitely opportunities for Livepeer to play in. It's unclear that whether Livepeer will be building a system for that, or Livepeer will be leveraging other providers to do that. And that's kind of the beauty of being open source, right? It's kind of like plug and play. Like people can kind of take this software that comes with a network and plug into whatever they want to use it for, right? And we'll see how things develop, and then we'll be able to have an opinion on whether it's useful for Livepeer to build it, or whether it's useful for Livepeer to leverage something that someone else has already built.
Okay, that's super interesting.
Yeah.
Thanks for that.
Yeah, and the interesting thing here is that Nelson, like it's so hard for us to imagine what new use cases Livepeer would enable, because whenever you decrease the price of something by 10x, all of a sudden there's all these new use cases that pop up that just was not possible before, right? So it enabled all of these new opportunities, and as the innovator, you have no idea what those new use cases are going to be when you're building it, and they just kind of reveal themselves, and you just try to capture the opportunity, right? You try to serve the new demand. So I think we're very much at the cusp of that. We're starting to talk to people who are, and we're pretty small, right? Like people who like by chance hear about Livepeer, will come like sometimes pop into the community and be like, oh, like I have this interesting use case. Can you guys help us with that? So I think as Livepeer becomes more mature and the service really starts to work well, all like people will start to hear about it, and new use cases will start to pop up.
Yeah, and I guess like with the rise of Twitch, the rise of TikTok, rise of Periscope, what's worthy of live streaming is evolving as well. So like you sort of see the whole landscape changing, which is interesting.
Absolutely, yeah, it's pretty crazy how quickly this industry is growing, just the live streaming industry. Like I read a report the other day that Twitch now accounts for 3% of all the traffic on the internet, all the video traffic on the internet, which is crazy, right? This is this new service that streams people playing video games, and it accounts for 3% of all internet traffic. And yeah, that's just a lot of interesting use cases that will start to grow.
Okay, yeah, no, that's really interesting. Okay, well, unless anyone has any other questions, I think we might finish up there. But thanks for joining, everyone. So on the call next week, we're going to be focusing more on some of the products related to token holders and staking. So yeah, we should be having some other members of the Livepeer team joining us to walk us through that, and to ask any questions regarding to token holder products or staking.
Awesome.
Anyway, awesome guys, thanks for joining, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nelson.
Nelson.
Thanks guys. Thanks Jen, and thanks Jen for joining us as well.